Professor Velthar pulled up another set of data on the hologram. Medical scans, biological readings, charts that showed impossible numbers in red warning colors. These readings were taken from human soldiers during the battle, he said. I must confess, when I first reviewed this data, I assumed it was corrupted. The stress markers are beyond what my species considers survivable. The charts showed adrenaline levels, cortisol measurements, blood pressure readings, all of them far into the danger zones, all of them sustained for days or weeks at a time. This reading here, Velthar pointed to one chart. This soldier maintained an adrenaline level that should have caused complete system failure within 6 hours. Yet this reading spans 48 hours. How did this person not die? They did die, Hannah said quietly. That soldier was in my squad. She died on hour 51. Heart failure. She was 23 years old. The professor's skin paled. I apologize. I did not mean to. It's fine, Hannah interrupted. You're trying to understand. That's good. Yes, these levels kill us. Yes, we pushed our bodies past their limits. Many of us paid for it. But what choice did we have? Tejo moved to the display, studying the medical data. This one here, 96 hours without sleep. That was probably me. I remember those 4 days. Everything had a strange quality to it. Colors too bright. Sounds too loud. I could see enemy soldiers who weren't there. But I could also see the real ones, so I kept shooting. You fought while hallucinating? Takari asked, her antennae quivering with distress. Everyone fought while hallucinating after a certain point, Tejo said. Sleep deprivation affects everyone. But you learn to work through it. You learn to trust your instincts even when your mind is lying to you. Minho pointed to another data set. These are infection rates. Look at that spike around day 120. That's when we ran completely out of antibiotics. Every wound became life-threatening. Every scratch could kill you. I knew a soldier named Dae-hyun, Minho continued. He cut his hand on some metal. Small cut, nothing serious. But infection set in. We had nothing to treat it with. We watched his hand swell up, turn colors, start to rot. He kept fighting for 3 more days. Then the infection reached his bloodstream. He died that night. From a cut he got opening a ration pack. The alien students looked horrified. Some were making notes. Others just stared. Velthar pulled up psychological data now. These measurements show post-traumatic stress markers that, according to human medical literature, should have resulted in complete psychological breakdown. Yet combat effectiveness remained relatively stable. How? It didn't, Hannah said. We were breaking down, all of us. We would shake uncontrollably. We would cry for no reason. We would freeze up at wrong moments. Some soldiers stopped talking entirely. Others couldn't stop talking. We were all damaged. But you continued fighting, Velthar said. What else were we going to do? Hannah asked. Breaking down was a luxury we couldn't afford. So we broke down while we fought. We broke down while we carried wounded. We broke down while we fixed weapons and stood guard and did everything else. Being broken didn't mean we got to stop. Borith's voice bubbled softly. This seems unbearably cruel. Not just the enemy's actions, but the demands placed on you by your own command structure. Suho never demanded anything he didn't do himself, Taiho said sharply. He fought longer than any of us. Slept less, ate less. Carried more wounded. He led from the front. When he finally ordered us to do the impossible, we did it, because we knew he had already done more. Tell them what happened to Suho, Minho said quietly. Taiho was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. Day 208. We were down to maybe 800 effectives. The enemy launched their biggest push yet. Every sector under attack simultaneously. Suho was coordinating the defense from a forward position. A shell hit his bunker. When we dug him out, he had lost his right arm and half his face was burned. The students made various sounds of distress. The medics wanted to sedate him, Taiho continued. But we had no medicine for that either. So he just kept commanding for 3 more days. With one arm half blind in constant pain, he kept issuing orders, directing troops, holding the defense together. He died on day 211. Not from his wounds, from exhaustion. His body just gave up. That is horrifying, Shin said. That is heroic, Minho corrected. That is what leadership looks like when everything else is gone. Velthar pulled up casualty lists. Names scrolled past on the hologram. Thousands of them. I must ask something. You have spoken about many individuals who died. But you survived. How do you live with that? How do you continue after watching so many die? The three veterans looked at each other. The question hung in the air, heavy and complicated. You don't, Hana finally said. You don't live with it. You carry it. Every day. Every name. Every face. Every person you couldn't save. You carry all of it. I see their faces sometimes, Teho said. In crowds. I'll see someone who looks like a soldier I knew. For a second, I think they survived. Then I remember they didn't. It happens less now than it used to, but it still happens. Minho touched his legs, the ones that ended at the knees. Every time I sit in this wheelchair, I remember the medic who saved my life. Salmon. I remember her hands shaking as she worked. I remember her voice. I remember everything. And I remember that she died 4 days later, that she saved me but couldn't save herself. So why are you here? Reth asked. Why study the war you fought in? Why relive these memories? Because someone has to, Hana said. Because if we don't tell you what it was really like, you'll only know the statistics, the tactics, the outcomes. You won't know the people. You won't know what it cost. And if you don't know what it cost, you might be too willing to do it again. Teho nodded. We're here because every war has two stories. The one in the history books and the one in the hearts of the people who fought it. Both stories matter. You need both to understand what really happened. And we're here, Minho added, because the people who died deserve to be remembered. Not as numbers, not as casualties, as people, as soldiers who fought for something bigger than themselves, as friends who saved each other. As family, Professor Velthar looked at his prepared lecture notes. Pages of tactical analysis, strategic assessments, mathematical models of combat effectiveness. Slowly, he closed the file. I have been teaching this course incorrectly, he said. I have been teaching warfare. But you are right. Warfare and war are different. Warfare is what we study. War is what you survived. And I cannot teach war from a textbook. He looked at the three humans. Would you be willing to return? To help teach the rest of this course? To provide the perspective that my analysis lacks? The veterans looked at each other again. That silent communication passing between them. Yes, Hana said. On one condition. Name it. Every casualty gets named. Not numbered. Named. Every person who died at Proxima Outpost was someone. They were loved. They mattered. If we're going to teach this, we teach that. Agreed, Velthar said immediately. Taiho spoke up. And we tell the complete truth. Not just the heroic parts. Not just the victories. We tell about the fear. The mistakes. The times we failed. The times we broke down. All of it. Agreed, the professor said again. And one more thing, Minho said. We make sure your students understand that war is not glorious. It's not exciting. It's not an adventure. It's hell. And if there's any other choice, any other option, you take that instead. War should always be the last resort. Always. That, Velthar said, is perhaps the most important lesson of all. The lecture hall had been silent throughout this exchange. Now slowly one student began to applaud. Then another, then more. Within seconds, the entire hall was filled with the sound of various species showing approval in their own ways. Clapping, chiming, thrumming, clicking. The three veterans stood together on the platform, three elderly humans who had survived hell and lived to tell about it. They didn't smile. They didn't wave. They just stood there carrying the weight of all those memories, all those lost friends, all those years. Finally, Velthar spoke again. Class dismissed. We will resume tomorrow with our new instructors, and from this day forward, this course will be taught correctly, with humanity, with truth, with honor. The students began to file out, but many stopped to speak with the veterans, to thank them, to ask questions, to simply acknowledge what they had heard. Teho, Hana, and Minho stayed, answering questions, sharing more stories, making sure that the people of Proxima Outpost would not be forgotten, because that, in the end, was why they were really there. Not for themselves, not for glory, but for all those who couldn't tell their own stories anymore, for Jiho and Nari and Dai and Yuna and Suho and Jinwoo and Somin and Daehyun and Junho, for all of them, for the family they lost but would never forget. Professor Velthar stood silent for a long moment. His silver skin had darkened to almost gray, a sign of deep emotion in his species. Finally, he gestured to the three veterans. Would you be willing to describe your experiences in more detail, to help my students understand not just what happened, but what it was like to live through it? Mino rolled his wheelchair forward. I'll start. Someone should know what the first day was like. The hologram shifted at Velthar's command, showing the outpost before the battle began. It looked peaceful. Small buildings clustered together, defensive walls that seemed adequate, soldiers going about routine duties. This was the morning, Minho said. Day 0. I was in the engineering bay, checking power systems. Routine maintenance. The most exciting thing that had happened in weeks was someone finding a leak in the water recycling system. He paused. We thought we had time. We thought if trouble came, we would see it coming. We were wrong. The hologram changed, showing the first orbital strike. Bright flashes from above. Explosions ripping through the outpost's northern section. The attack came at 600 hours, Minho continued. No warning. No declaration of war. No chance to prepare. One moment I was checking a power coupling. The next moment the ceiling was coming down. Half my unit was buried in the first 30 seconds. His voice stayed level, emotionless, but his hands gripped the wheelchair arms tightly. We had a lieutenant named Jinwoo. Good kid, smart. He was standing right next to me when the second strike hit. I remember turning to tell him to get to safety, but when I turned, he was just gone. There was a crater where he had been standing. I found pieces of his uniform later. Nothing else. Several students shifted uncomfortably. Takari's antennae drooped. The orbital bombardment lasted 4 hours, Minho said. We lost half our defensive positions in the first hour. Lost our command center. Lost our communications array. Lost our medical facility. Lost 1,500 soldiers and 300 civilians, all before we even knew who was attacking or why. What did you do? Preth asked quietly. We dug, Minho said simply. We dug people out of the rubble. We tried to save who we could, and we prepared for whatever came next. Taiho stepped forward. What came next was the ground assault. That started on day 2. By then we had maybe 4,000 combat-ready soldiers. The enemy had close to 50,000. We knew the numbers. We had captured one of their scout units and got intelligence from them. He pointed to the hologram, which now showed enemy positions surrounding the outpost. They didn't rush us. They were smart. They took positions, established supply lines, brought up heavy weapons. They knew they could afford to wait. We couldn't. Why not? A student asked. Because waiting meant more time without supplies, Taiho explained. More time for our wounded to die. More time for fear to set in. So Commander Suho decided we would attack first. Hit them before they were fully established. Maybe break their lines. Maybe find a way to signal for help. The hologram showed human forces pushing out from the defensive perimeter. Small red dots moving into the mass of blue enemy markers. It was suicide, Taiho said flatly. We all knew it. But Suho needed volunteers, and every single soldier stepped forward. Every single one. He was quiet for a moment, remembering. I led second squad in that attack. We pushed out at dawn. The plan was to hit their supply depot, cause chaos, pull back before they could organize. We made it to the depot. We even destroyed some of their supplies, but we lost 18 soldiers doing it, and we discovered they had 3 more depots we didn't know about. So the attack failed, Velthar observed. The attack accomplished nothing tactical, Taiho corrected. But it wasn't a failure. It showed the enemy we would fight. It showed our own people we wouldn't just sit and wait to die, and it bought us information about enemy positions. 18 lives for information. That was the mathematics of that battle. Hana moved to stand beside them. My part started on day 15. I was squad leader for medical recovery. That meant going into combat zones to pull out wounded soldiers. Sometimes, while fighting was still happening, the hologram showed the battlefield from ground level now. Cratered terrain, burning wreckage, bodies. The enemy was efficient, Hana said. They didn't waste ammunition on our dead. But wounded soldiers calling for help, they would shoot those. It forced us to respond, to expose ourselves trying to save our people. It was good tactics. How many recovery missions did you run? Boroth asked. I stopped counting after 60, Hana said. We would go out 3-4 times a day sometimes. We lost recovery teams regularly. My original squad of 8 was down to 3 by day 30. I recruited new members, trained them fast, watched some of them die on their first mission. She pointed to a section of the battlefield on the hologram. There was a crater there. Ditch really, about 3 meters deep. It became known as the collection point. Wounded from 3 different sectors would crawl there because it had some cover. My squad made runs to that crater dozens of times. There was a boy, she continued softly. Private Junho, he was 17. Lied about his age to enlist. He got hit in the legs on day 28. Couldn't walk. He crawled for 6 hours to reach that crater. When we found him, he was still clutching his rifle. He died while we were carrying him back. He bled out in my arms. He kept apologizing for being heavy. The lecture hall was absolutely silent. That crater killed 2 of my squad members, Hana said. It was a trap. Enemy had it ranged perfectly. They let the wounded collect there, then they waited for recovery teams. But we kept going back, because those were our people, because leaving them was not an option. Minho spoke again. I lost my legs on day 68. Engineering team was trying to repair the defensive wall. Enemy artillery hit us, killed 3 engineers outright. I was lucky. Just lost my legs below the knee. He said it so casually. Just lost my legs, there was no anesthetic left. The medics had to amputate with whatever they had. I was awake for it. I remember every second, but I also remember the medic holding my hand. Her name was Soman. She talked to me the whole time. Told me about her home, about her family, about anything except what she was doing. She saved my life. She died 4 days later, enemy sniper. After I lost my legs, Minho continued, I thought I was done. I thought they would put me with the wounded. Wait for evacuation that wasn't coming. But Suho came to see me. He asked if I could still work on power systems. I said yes. So he had soldiers carry me to the engineering bay every day. I kept working. No legs, constant pain, but I kept working. Because everyone else was. Taiho picked up the story. By day 100, we were eating 1 meal a day. And that meal was whatever we could scavenge. We burned furniture for heat. We used melted snow for water. We counted ammunition 1 bullet at a time. And we kept fighting. I went 43 hours without sleep once, he said. Not because I wanted to. Because my position was under constant attack. Every time I tried to rest, enemy would probe our defenses. After a while, I just stayed awake. Started hallucinating around hour 38. Saw things that weren't there. But I kept my position. How is that physically possible? Shin asked. It shouldn't be, Hana answered. By every medical standard, we should have collapsed. Should have died. But we had something driving us that no medical scan can measure. What? The crystalline being asked. Each other, Hana said. I stayed awake because Taiho was awake. He stayed on his feet because Minho was still working with no legs. Minho kept working because soldiers were still fighting. We all kept going because stopping meant letting everyone else down. Velthar had been listening quietly. Now he spoke.
This is what I failed to account for in my analysis.
The interconnected nature of human perseverance. You did not fight as individuals. You fought as a collective organism where each part sustained the others. We fought as a family, Minho corrected. By day 100, everyone who was left had saved someone else's life at least once. We had all carried wounded. We had all shared food. We had all held the line while others rested. We knew each other's names, knew each other's stories. We weren't just soldiers anymore. We were all we had. And that, Taiho added, is why we held for 237 days. Not because of tactics, not because of weapons, because we refused to abandon our family, even when that family was dying around us, especially then. Minho reached the center platform first. His wheelchair hummed as it adjusted to the lower floor level. Hana and Taiho stood on either side of him, 3 humans facing 200 aliens. Professor Velthar stepped back, his usual confidence shaken. Before we begin, Velthar said carefully, I must ask, how many other human veterans attend this university? Taiho spoke quietly. More than you think, Professor. We don't usually announce ourselves. We come here to learn about the galaxy we fought to be part of. The professor's skin shifted colors, a sign of deep thought among his people. I see. Then I have been teaching about events to those who lived through them. This is... He trailed off. Awkward? Hana suggested. Yes, it is. A small sound came from the student section. It might have been a laugh or might have been something else. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. Velthar gestured to the holographic display. Perhaps we should continue with the analysis. Unless you object to examining the tactical situation. Show us what you have, Minho said. We'll tell you where you're wrong. The professor's 4 hands moved across his control interface. The hologram shifted, showing a three-dimensional map of Proxima Outpost. Color-coded markers indicated troop positions, supply routes, and defensive structures. The human defensive strategy made no logical sense, Velthar began. They spread their forces too thin. They attempted to hold a perimeter far larger than their numbers could reasonably defend. Standard doctrine would suggest consolidating to a smaller, more defensible position. Standard doctrine, Minho interrupted, assumes you can afford to lose ground. We couldn't. Every meter we gave up brought the enemy closer to 40,000 civilians who had nowhere to run. Takari raised her foreleg. But surely evacuation was possible. Why not remove the civilians? Hana answered. Our 3 transport ships were destroyed in the first orbital strike. The enemy controlled the space around the planet. Nobody was leaving. The hologram zoomed in on specific battle positions. Red icons flickered and disappeared as the timeline advanced. Each disappearing icon represented soldiers who had died. Day 12, Velthar continued. The humans lost their primary command center. Chain of command should have collapsed. Yet organized resistance continued. How? Tejo stepped closer to the hologram. His eyes tracked the battle movements like he was seeing it happen again. Junior officers took command. When they fell, sergeants stepped up. When sergeants fell, corporals led. When corporals fell, privates did what needed to be done. We didn't need a building to tell us what to do. But without centralized coordination, Boroth bubbled, how did you maintain tactical cohesion? We didn't always, Tejo admitted. Sometimes squads got cut off. Sometimes units went hours without orders, but everyone knew the mission. Hold the line. Protect the civilians. Every single person knew what they were there to do. Velthar pulled up medical data, charts and graphs showing human biological responses during the battle. These readings are extreme. Adrenaline levels sustained at rates that should cause cardiac failure. Cortisol markers indicating stress far beyond survivable thresholds. Documented cases of humans fighting for 72 hours without sleep. 72 hours? Shin chimed. How? The Crystalline Accord conducted studies. Most species cannot function cognitively beyond 40 hours of wakefulness. Function is a generous word, Hana said. A ghost of a smile touched her face, but there was no humor in it. We didn't function. We operated on instinct and fear and something else. Something you don't measure in medical scans. What is this something else? Velthar asked. Stubbornness, Minho said. Spite, maybe. The knowledge that if we fell asleep, people died. So we didn't sleep. Simple as that. The hologram shifted again, showing casualty estimates. Numbers scrolled past. Velthar highlighted specific statistics. The average survival time for a wounded human in this battle was 6 hours before medical treatment. Many injuries that would be minor with proper care became fatal, yet humans continued engaging in combat despite injury rates that should have broken morale completely. A student in the middle row spoke up. His name was Reth, a mammalian species covered in blue-gray fur. I don't understand. If your soldiers were wounded, dying, starving, why did they not refuse to fight? Where were your mutinies? Your desertions? The 3 humans looked at each other. Something passed between them again, that wordless communication. There was nowhere to desert to, Tejo finally said. We were surrounded. And even if we could have run, where would we go? Leave the civilians to die? Leave our friends to fight alone? Your cultural framework prioritizes group survival over individual preservation, Velthar observed. This is documented in human sociology, but the degree of self-sacrifice displayed here exceeds theoretical models. Hana's jaw tightened. We weren't following theoretical models, Professor. We were trying to survive, to help each other survive. You can't put that in a chart. The hologram displayed weapon specifications, diagrams of human rifles, their chemical propellant systems, their mechanical firing mechanisms. These weapons, Velthar said, have a documented failure rate of 18% in cold weather conditions. The temperature at Proxima Outpost regularly dropped to -40 degrees. How did you continue to maintain combat effectiveness? We fixed them, Minho said, with whatever we had. Parts from broken weapons went into working ones. We used lubricants not designed for weapons because we had no proper oil. Some soldiers kept their rifles under their clothes to keep them warm. Shared body heat with a gun. That's what we did. Inefficient, noted a student. Alive, Minho countered. Inefficient but alive. Velthar pulled up tactical footage from the battle. Grainy, damaged video showing humans in defensive positions. The quality was poor, corrupted by age and damage. But the movements were visible. Soldiers running between positions, dragging wounded. Firing, reloading, firing again. This footage was recovered from enemy sources, the professor said. It shows day 31. Notice the human movements. They are slower than at the battle's start. Reaction times have decreased, yet they maintain defensive positions. Can you explain? Taiho watched the footage. His face had gone very still. I remember day 31. That was the day we lost Suho. He was our commanding officer. Best leader I ever served under. He shared his rations until he collapsed from hunger. Medics forced food into him, and the next day he was back on the line. Irrational, Takari observed. He weakened himself unnecessarily. He kept his soldiers strong, Hana said sharply. He made sure we could fight. That's what leaders do. The footage continued playing. An explosion rocked one of the positions. Several humans went down. Others immediately moved to help, exposing themselves to enemy fire to drag the wounded to safety. There, Velthar pointed. That behavior, moving into danger to retrieve the fallen. It contradicts survival instinct. It reduces combat effectiveness by removing additional soldiers from defensive positions, yet it happens repeatedly throughout the footage. We don't leave our people behind, Minho said. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. Dead or alive, wounded or whole. We bring them home always. Even when it costs additional lives? A student asked. Especially then, Minho answered. Because if we don't, then what are we fighting for? If we abandon our own, we've already lost everything that matters. The lecture hall had gone quiet again. Students who had seemed casually interested before now leaned forward. Some were taking notes. Others simply stared at the three humans on the stage. Professor Velthar looked at his data, then at the veterans, then back at his data. I have taught this course for 30 cycles. I have analyzed this battle dozens of times, but I am beginning to understand that I have never truly understood it at all. No, Hana said gently. You understood the facts. The numbers, the tactics, the outcomes, but you didn't understand the people. And in the end, Professor, the people were all that mattered. The hologram shifted again, pulling up more recovered audio files. Professor Velthar hesitated, his four hands hovering over the controls. He looked at the three veterans. Perhaps we should move on to a different analytical approach. Play them, Hana said. If these recordings exist, students should hear them. All of them. Velthar nodded slowly and activated the next file. Static crackled through the hall's audio system. Then voices emerged. Young voices, scared voices trying to sound brave. Charlie Company holding position 7. We need ammunition. Any ammunition? We're down to 17 rounds per soldier. Position 7. This is supply. Nothing available. Hold what you have. Supply we can't hold with 17 rounds. The enemy pushes every 4 hours. We need position 7, I know. I'm sorry. There's nothing. Make every shot count, a long pause. Then quietly, understood. Charlie Company out, the audio cut off. Another one started immediately. A different voice, older, hoarse with exhaustion. This is Commander Suho, day 47. We lost Sector 3 today. Pulled back to secondary defenses. Casualties were heavy. I have maybe 2,000 effectives left. The rest are wounded, dead, or too exhausted to fight. We need relief. We need support. We need... A long pause. We need a miracle. Taiho's hands gripped the edge of the platform. I remember when he sent that. He stayed up all night trying to reach anyone. Any ship, any fleet, any station. Nobody answered. Velthar played another recording. This one was clearer, more recent in the battle timeline. A woman's voice, professional but strained. Medical to all units. We are out of antibiotics. We are out of plasma. We are performing surgeries with salvaged tools and no anesthetic. If you are wounded, know that we will do everything we can. But understand that your chances are not good. I'm sorry. Medical out, Hana closed her eyes. That was Nari, she was 19. Youngest chief medical officer in the Corps. She kept working even after she caught an infection from one of her patients. Refused treatment because medicine was too scarce. She died on day 62. Borath's voice bubbled softly. She died treating others? She died saving others, Hana corrected. There's a difference. More audio files played. Requests for ammunition that couldn't be filled. Calls for evacuation that went unanswered. Soldiers reporting position after position falling, being retaken, falling again. Through it all ran a thread of grim determination. Voices that refused to break even when everything around them was breaking. Takari shifted uncomfortably. Professor, I must ask, why are we listening to these? What analytical purpose do they serve? Context, Velthar said quietly. We are providing context. But these are just emotional recordings, another student protested. They don't change the tactical analysis. The humans still made inefficient choices. They still suffered preventable casualties. Emotional responses don't alter strategic reality. Minho turned his wheelchair to face the student directly. Emotional responses were our strategic reality. Every decision we made was emotional. We fought because we loved the people behind us more than we feared dying. We held positions because abandoning them felt worse than death. You can't separate the emotion from the tactics. They're the same thing. Velthar pulled up a new display. This one showed photographs. Human faces, young and old, smiling in some images, serious in others. Hundreds of faces scrolling past. These are the casualties from Proxima Outpost, the professor said. 14,000 individuals across both sides of the conflict. In my previous lectures, I presented them as statistics, numbers in a database. But these were all people, correct? Every single one, Taiho confirmed. I knew probably 300 of these faces personally. Served with them. Ate with them. Watched some of them die. A face appeared on the screen. A young man with a bright smile and pilot's insignia on his uniform. Day, Hana said immediately. Shuttle pilot. He flew 19 rescue missions into active combat zones. His shuttle was damaged so badly that the mechanic said it shouldn't be able to fly. He flew it anyway. Saved maybe 200 wounded before his engine finally gave out. He crashed on mission 20. Died on impact, another face. A woman with short hair and engineer's tools on her belt. Yuna, Minho said. Power system specialist. She kept the generators running for 73 days straight. Barely slept. Barely ate. Every time something broke, she fixed it. Every time we thought the power would fail, she found a way. On day 74, the main reactor took a direct hit. She was inside doing repairs. There wasn't enough left to bury. More faces scrolled past. The veterans named some of them. Told brief stories. Each name was a person. Each person was a story. Each story was a life that ended on that rocky planet 50 years ago. The alien students had stopped taking notes. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed disturbed by the specificity, the reality of what they were hearing. Shin's crystalline body chimed softly. I am beginning to understand something. You did not fight because you calculated victory was possible. You fought because the alternative was unthinkable. Yes, Hana said simply. But that is not logical, Shin continued. If defeat was inevitable, then fighting only delayed it while costing additional lives. Surrender would have preserved more of your people. Would it? Taiho challenged. You said earlier that enemy doctrine called for enslavement, not execution. How many of us would have survived slavery? How many of those 40,000 civilians? How many would have wished they had died fighting instead? I cannot answer that, Shin admitted. Neither could we, Taiho said. So we made the choice we could live with. Or die with. Professor Velthar pulled up the tactical map again, but now it looked different. The red dots weren't just markers anymore. They were people. Each one that blinked out was someone like Day or Yuna or Nari. Day 73, Velthar said. This was when I calculated the battle was effectively over. You were surrounded, cut off, outnumbered, and running out of everything. Yet you held for another 164 days. How? Because we were still breathing, Minho said. Because the civilians were still alive. Because giving up meant all those deaths before meant nothing. We held because we couldn't not hold. That is a double negative, a student pointed out. Yes, Minho agreed. It is, that's how bad things were. We couldn't even think straight anymore. But we could still fight. Hana moved to the hologram, her hand passing through the light display. Professor, your analysis focused on what we didn't have. No shields, no energy weapons, no supplies, no support. You're right, we had none of those things. She turned to face the students. But we had each other. We had commanders who shared their last food. We had medics who treated wounded until they collapsed. We had engineers who kept impossible machines running. We had soldiers who held impossible positions. And we had people who refused to surrender even when surrender made sense. Why? Takari asked. The insectoid seemed genuinely confused. Why refuse when refusal only brings more death? Taiho answered. Because some things matter more than survival. Honor, duty, protecting the helpless. Keeping promises. We promised those civilians we would keep them safe. We promised each other we wouldn't quit. Those promises mattered more than comfort, more than safety, sometimes more than life. The lecture hall was completely silent now. No whispers, no movement, no sound except the soft hum of environmental systems. Velthar looked at his notes, his prepared lecture, his analytical frameworks. Then he looked at the three humans standing before him. Finally, he spoke. I have been teaching this course for 30 cycles. I thought I understood warfare. But I only understood war. There is a difference, isn't there? Yes, Hannah said softly. Warfare is what you teach. War is what we lived. And the difference between them is everything. The lecture hall was massive, built to hold students from dozens of different worlds. The ceiling curved high above, showing the stars beyond through transparent panels. 200 students sat in rows that circled down toward the center stage. Some had scales, others had fur. A few glowed softly in the dim light. 3 looked completely human. Professor Velthar moved to the center platform, his forearms gesturing as the holographic display flickered to life behind him. He was Kree, tall and thin with silver skin that reflected the light. His species was known across the galaxy for their scholarly work. They studied wars the way others studied art. Welcome to Advanced Warfare Studies, Velthar said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. Today we examine a conflict from the human homeworld's expansion period. The Siege of Proxima Outpost, dated by human calendar as 21-97, 50 years ago by their time measurement. In the back row, an old human man shifted in his seat. His name was Taiho. He was 68 years old, with gray hair cut short and hands that never seemed to stay completely still. He wore simple clothes and had chosen a seat far from the front. Nobody paid attention to him. 3 rows down, a human woman named Hannah wrote notes on her datapad. She was 71, thin and straight-backed, with white hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes followed every word the professor said. Her jaw was set tight. Near the center aisle, Minho sat in his wheelchair. At 74, he was the oldest human in the room. His legs ended at the knees and his chair hummed quietly with its anti-gravity field. He watched the professor with dark, unreadable eyes. The battle lasted 8 months, Velthar continued. Holographic images appeared, showing a small outpost on a rocky planet. Human forces numbered approximately 6,000 soldiers. They faced an enemy force of 48,000. The humans had no shield technology, no energy weapons, and limited supplies. A student near the front raised a tentacle. She was Takari, an insectoid with a hard shell that gleamed green and black. Professor, why did they not surrender immediately? The numbers were impossible. Velthar's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. An excellent question. This is what makes human warfare so fascinating to study. They held the position for 237 days. The casualty rate was severe, 14,000 deaths total counting both sides. The hologram shifted, showing tactical maps. Red dots marked human positions. Blue dots showed enemy movements. The red dots grew smaller as the timeline moved forward. Their weapons were chemical propellant-based, Velthar explained. Primitive by our standards. They fired small metal projectiles using controlled explosions. These weapons jammed frequently in cold weather. They overheated in sustained fire, yet the humans continued to use them. Borath, an aquatic student in a water-filled environment suit, bubbled a question. How did they function in such conditions? The temperature readings show extremes that would kill my species in hours. Human biology is remarkably adaptable, Velthar said. However, their tolerance has limits. Medical reports from the battle show that humans fought with frostbite, infections, broken bones, and severe malnutrition. Many continued fighting while injured. Hannah's stylus pressed harder against her datapad. A small crack appeared in the corner. The professor pulled up new images. These showed the battlefield itself. Craters and debris, broken structures, dark stains on rock that might have been blood or might have been something else. The siege reached its critical point on day 73. The human position was surrounded. All supply lines were cut. Orbital support was eliminated. By all logical analysis, the battle was over. He paused for effect. Yet they fought for another 164 days. Whispers ran through the students. A crystalline being named Shin chimed softly. That defies basic survival logic. What did they hope to achieve? Protection of civilian colonists, Velthar answered. 40,000 non-combatants were located behind the human defensive lines. The humans believed that if they fell, these civilians would be killed. Believed? Takari asked. Was this belief accurate? Enemy battle doctrine suggests the civilians would have been enslaved, not killed, Velthar said. The humans may have been operating on incomplete intelligence. Taiho's hands gripped the edge of his desk. His knuckles went white. The professor activated an audio file. This recording was recovered from the battlefield. It provides insight into human psychological state during combat stress. Static filled the hall. Then a voice, young and raw with exhaustion. This is Lieutenant Jiho Park Medical Corps. I need emergency evacuation for wounded. We have 15 critical, maybe 30 more who won't last the night. Please respond, please, anyone. More static. Heavy breathing. The sound of explosions in the background. I know nobody's coming. I know, but I had to try. If anyone ever hears this, we did our best. We did everything we could. Tell them that. Please tell them that. The audio cut off. Silence filled the lecture hall. Some students looked uncomfortable. Others seemed confused by the emotional content. Velthar nodded. Notice the irrational hope displayed. The human continues to request aid despite knowing it will not arrive. This psychological denial is common in their species during extreme stress. A chair scraped loudly across the floor. Every head turned. Hana was standing. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Professor Velthar, permission to provide additional context. The professor's eyes widened slightly. You have studied this campaign? I was there, Hana said quietly. That voice you played, that was Lieutenant Jiho Park. He was 22 years old. I was his commanding officer. I was 21. The silence became absolute. Takari's antennae quivered. But that would make you? 71, Hana confirmed. I'm 71 years old. Another chair moved. Taiho slowly raised his hand. I was there too. 2nd Platoon, Charlie Company. Then Minho lifted his arm, the movement stiff but deliberate. 3rd Battalion. Combat engineer. Lost my legs on day 68. The lecture hall erupted. Students turned to each other, their various languages creating a wall of sound. Some stood for a better look. Others activated their translation devices, sure they had misunderstood. Professor Velthar stood frozen on his platform, all 4 arms hanging loose. His silver skin had gone slightly darker. For a long moment, he simply stared at the 3 humans. Finally, he found his voice. This is unprecedented. In 30 years of teaching, I have never... He paused, composed himself. Would you be willing to share your perspectives? Hana looked at Taiho. Taiho looked at Minho. Something passed between them, some silent communication that needed no words. Minho rolled his wheelchair into the aisle. Yes, Professor, we would. Because your analysis is missing something important. What is that? Velthar asked. Everything, Minho said simply. Your analysis is missing everything that mattered. The old engineer began making his way down toward the stage. Hana and Taiho followed, 3 elderly humans walking slowly through a hall full of aliens, carrying 50 years of memory with them. The professor watched them come. The students watched them come. And the lecture about the siege of Proxima Outpost was about to become something very different from what anyone had expected.